Hi, I'm Liz.
And I'm Rhea.
Welcome to Karma's My Bitch, a podcast about love,
sex,
connection,
abundance,
joy,
purpose,
peace,
and how life isn't simply the stories we tell ourselves. So when we know what we want, but somehow we're not being able to get it, does that mean we're off course?
As we know, and in our various discussions around fate, once you've reached happiness, you're effectively living in your fate, really, which means that you cannot be off course, really.
Okay.
Because you're within your larger fate tapestry.
Yeah.
So everything that is
you can't
in
fall
that
off your fate.
No. Because everything that is within your fate is a possibility that you created for yourself.
Okay. Before coming into body.
Exactly.
What about when you're in your unwritten part of your fate?
Oh, even then, but that's when you're really taking off. Yeah, so that's like even better because that means that you are creating as you go along. And so all that you are creating is completely in line with your purpose and your happiness and your path to bliss. Our fates mean that there are multiple possibilities that reside in every choice we make, right? So we can make any choice out there and it will not be the wrong one.
That's kind of more karma stuff, right?
Exactly. In karma, it was like, you would overthink every single choice because you're like, if I choose wrong, I'm going to be so miserable. Yeah. And I don't even know how I'm going to get myself out of that. It's often difficult to pivot out of the choices we make in our karma.
Well, obviously, because that's why you're overthinking all the time. You're trying to avoid your karma coming up, right? So if I say the right thing, then it won't blow in my face. If I do the right thing, then it'll work out for me. And I need it to work out for me because I need to be sure that I'm going to be okay because I don't think I'm good enough.
Exactly.
Which makes sense because I guess that's why karma was designed to show us to make choices, right?
Yes,
because then we can see that we can make choices and we can ultimately be okay because the more we choose from kind of that deep feeling of like following your heart, higher self, whatever you want to call it, soul, then actually you get out of your karma. So you kind of also learn how to make choices because you learn what feels like the right choice for you and what doesn't.
Right, exactly. You get to develop the discernment or exercise that knowing deep down. And the more that you exercise it, as you say, experience makes normal. And we also get to a point when even in our karma, we can say, well, it works out in the end, right? To some degree, because to some degree it does, because all of our choices and the outcomes are just meant to remind us that we had the power to make them in the first place.
Which is what destiny is, right? That's why it's narrow, because if you make the choice, let's say you make the choice to follow separation guidelines with one person, you'll meet the next person and have this opportunity again and again and again and again. So it's just when you say fuck this dependent, but you'll only ever say fuck this when it feels right for you to do so.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly.
So at the end of the day, you're always going to get to where you go, which is kind of what in a previous episode we had that conversation about emotions and like the bigger emotions, like, so you've got like, oh, I'm making it out of sadness or fear or overthinking, or I'm making it out of like a knowing or a trust or a faith or a hope.
Exactly.
Then actually, in some ways, it almost doesn't matter. It just, you get there. Eventually you get there. The more sick of your shit you are, the more you're going to make different choices and they will feel natural to you because everything in this life, whether it's karmic dependent or not, actually, when it comes to making those choices from that space, they're natural choices to make, even though they may feel uncomfortable or they may feel different. Somehow it's still natural.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. But there comes a time when you're living in your fate, and I know you were going to have this conversation, as uncomfortable as it might be for anyone, but it is an important one to address, right? So you're living in your fate, and you've been making all your choices, and you're cruising along, and it's all good. And maybe you've had a pause moment, maybe you've had a pressure cooker moment, right?
Maybe both.
Yeah, maybe you've had both, or maybe you haven't yet had a pressure cooker moment for a while. Did a lot of stuff coming out of your karma, going through your karmic undoing process and, developing or honing your magic, and you're cruising along and then you hit this like snag and you're like, what the fuck? Now it's not the same as in the previous episode where you're like, oh, it's a bad day or a bad week, but you're like, oh, it's not so much that as a pressure cooker moment's coming, right? It hasn't come yet, but it's coming. Your soul knows it. Because it starts to kind of apply the brakes and it's like, okay, I got a choice to make here. And that choice can feel like a catch-22. Now, you know you're in your karma because a lot of choices feel like a catch-22. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Yeah. You can look at any circumstance, either if you're still in your karma, you can look at certain choices or circumstances you're facing. You can look at the person next to you. You can look at, you know, your country and the world. Anything that's going through its karma is a catch-22. Mm-hmm. Right? So if I don't do, so it would look like, well, if I don't do this or X, then I won't realize this profound desire I have. But if I do it, I know that I might lose something important to me.
Wait, that's in your fate or in your karma?
That's in your fate.
Okay. And is that true? Is that what it's like? As in,
it could feel that way.
But it's not that way.
It could feel that way. No, the reality is it's not that way, but it can feel that way.
I get that. I've been there.
Okay. So it's like a bit like my husband getting a phone call and saying, all right, London's finished. You got to come back to the mothership. And you're kind of sitting there and you're like, well, did I want to do that? Am I ready to do that? Is it time? Really? Like, is this what we saw? Well, we didn't really see anything. So, okay. But in making the decision, which was not an instantaneous one, we're also aware of the trade-offs that would have to be made. And they required careful consideration because they would impact other people. I mean, it impacted me because my work is where you are too, right? I mean, we can do it from anywhere, but you are where you are too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I can come with you.
So I did lose something. I lost my life in London in many ways. And my husband also lost his center because he enjoyed living in London, right? But we also knew that the call was coming because it was time.
So is it just about being okay with loss?
No, it's not so much about being okay with loss as understanding that in saying yes, in taking the one that you know you desire profoundly, because that's the one that's going to bring about the greatest amount of change. Even if it's going to land you right into a pressure cooker moment that might last a couple months in a transatlantic move, you know that on the other end, something's going to happen and it's cool and you may not know exactly what it is. But why not figure it out? As much as I lost my life in London, I didn't lose the relationships that matter to me most.
So actually, even though it feels like it's a loss, it's not a loss.
In making this choice, but because I know it is written in my fate and is going to lead me to something else, what am I really losing here? Mm. Or is it just going to force me to align differently? Like we said in the pressure cooker episode, you know, am I just going to be forced to align to a new or uncertain circumstance? Mm. And I've done it enough times. I've adjusted enough times. I know I'm going to do it. May not feel so good. As I get older, I do like my comfort, so I don't really enjoy it as much as I liked the adventure of it before, but I know I can do it.
How many pressure cooker moments does one have in their fate?
Enough, Rhea. Probably too many for you.
Okay. But like, are we saying like you're going to have like 4 pressure cooker moments a year?
Oh, no. You wouldn't even necessarily have one a year.
Okay.
They're really going to mark like big fate jumps or shifts. So they might feel like a lot. And then you're like, oh my God, I don't need that for a while or for another lifetime. But trust us, in a matter of a couple of years, you're going to be like, okay. If it happens again, you're like, I know what this looks like.
Fine. So it's really like 2, 3, 4 yearly.
Yes. I mean, yeah, they're not frequent. They're not meant to be rare, as in, wow, this like rarely happens, but they're actually meant to be infrequent.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, because
so I'm not going to have one for a while.
I'd like to think so. But again, let's not treat it like your karma. Like, oh my God, another, bit of my karma is up and I got a deal. It's not the same thing. And again, it gets you and moves you through to something that you know is going to be, and I don't mean this in a delayed gratification way. Well, it's worth it because on the other side is X. Mm. But you also know that it's shaping your life and your world in a way where there's just going to be total benefit. I think you need to think bigger. And these are really, and I think it's because for as many changes as you've made in your life, they've been more internal than external. Mm. And we're really talking about bigger jumps than that.
Are they always moving country?
No, not necessarily. But I think it's just the only one that has like made sense to, I mean, in my example, I think that's the one I would say has done the most for me and is the one I experience most.
Fine. So it could be
and that has been my pressure cooker. Those have been my pressure cooker moments.
Okay, fine.
You just have to figure out what it is that means you're living your fullest, that you're living from your fullest fate. You know, so that's understanding and exercising all the possibilities within that fate. So if my husband and I, if we just decided, listen, let's just stay in London instead of making this move, and we'll just sort of figure it out from there. And this was the same thing. Would that
still be in your fate? Would that still be fine?
It would still have been fine because it would have been within our fate, right? Because London is one of the cities in which we are able to grow and evolve and where we would have been able to work and stuff. So we could have made it work. But then at the same time, we wouldn't have necessarily been able to sort of reap the benefits of what a move to another city would have been. And perhaps how that would have served our other child as well, who was also wanting a change. It might feel like I was losing something I knew I needed to make the trade-off, at least temporarily. It might sound excusey or vague, right? Like, oh, you know, if this is what matters most to you, then do it. And then it'll never feel like a loss. And I'm like, well, that's not true, because I remember early on in the move and I was like, no, I still feel like I live in London. No, I still miss London, you know, like my heart is still in London. So no, I'm not going to say like, oh God, I just like ran into open arms, but I was accepting of it because I knew that I was into kind of I was curious. You know, it was kind of, I approach a move as like, it's a mystery for me to solve and uncover. Like, what's this one going to bring? Let it surprise me. In that respect, life is too short to try to stand still. Yeah. And that's just maybe who I am, though. So, you know, when you're exercising your fate, as in you're trying to assess those possibilities and understand them and how they might impact you, but not in like a mental way, but really trying to understand and explore the potential so you can get to your greatest goals. You know, it does just take time to align with it all. And then once you adjust, it's like, oh, okay, it's smooth again. It's never going to feel rocky for that long.
Regardless of the choice, will your potential for long-term joy and ultimate bliss be like diminished if you choose one or the other?
No, not at all, because it's all within your fate, and your fate is all about your happiness and getting to bliss. So it's not so much like, oh, it always works out in the end. Not so much that is, it's just always working out as I go along. That's the difference. So in karma, you're, you know, because you're kind of outcome based, because I need to get to this next thing and I need to make the right choice so I'll have some relief and I know that I'm doing okay. Right? And again, that's how we empower ourselves, every choice we make. And that's every choice, and that's moving us toward freedom. Now, when you are happy, it's not like, oh, in the end, it's all going to work out. It's just like with you. As I'm going along, I might have one or two bumps, but I can resolve that. It's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't take long, and it's never at the end of the rainbow. It's as you go along. And that's that's the difference.
That makes sense.
And that's really, and it's nice. That just kind of hit too, by the way. It's not in the outline, but I actually saw it.
No, that makes sense. And I guess I'm going to just circle back to this really quickly, because I'm sure there'll be people listening wondering this. How do you know that you're happy? And how do you know when you're in your fate?
Okay, so today's answer, you just don't worry about anything. You don't have worries. That's today's answer. What are you worried about? Nothing. How would guidance like to describe a worry?
Yeah, that's good.
Is that perhaps you don't wake up and question anything? It means that you're in flow. Doesn't mean if you're in flow that you're happy, but when you don't have worries, you're in flow. And again, if you don't have worries, then you are happy, because not only do you have all the building blocks, most importantly, though, that your knowing is aligned and you're living from that place. I mean, that's their answer for today.
But sometimes you still have to fight for what you truly desire.
Yes, you do.
And
you do.
Prioritize what you want beyond what you believe you need.
Absolutely. And that's a tricky thing. I think trickier than it sounds. But that's just where things that you so deeply desire to express require maybe a bit more effort.
But I don't worry about how they're going to be received. And I guess that's because I don't need the security. I don't need to cling to history.
No, and you don't even need to cling to peace. Like, do you remember how when you were in your karma and you're like, I know this is right because it brings me peace. So I'm just going to keep using peace as my barometer. If this brings me peace, then that's the thing I'm going to do.
Yeah. That was how I
Right?
knew how to follow my heart, because one of them would bring me peace and one of them wouldn't.
Exactly. And again, that's when you're in your karma, you kind of almost need a little bit of that help and that arrow, like this way, just keep going this way, you know? Yeah. But when you're happy, you don't even need to use that as a directive.
You just do whatever you want to do whenever you want to do it.
And it just keeps going okay.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, that's where you have your pause moment. That's just where something's signaling that maybe you just need to like slow your roll for a moment and take stock. Is there something I'm not seeing for a moment? Can I just figure this out? And then
what am I learning that's going to propel me to the next bit?
Exactly. And then you just go.
Because I guess you're coming to a place where it's not like, oh, I need to just keep going and, you know, so I don't feel pain or whatever. It's I want to realize my potential and I want to be fulfilled in every moment that I can be. So I'm going to just take everything I can out of every moment, every morsel of joy and every morsel of, and if I'm worrying about what comes next, I'm not going to enjoy the moment that I'm in now. And then I'm going to that doesn't work for me. So I'm going to be happy in the moment and then be happy in the next one.
Yeah. Just because I know I'm going to go from one to the next, and the next moment isn't dependent upon my present.
Yeah.
But if I keep pouring the energy from my present into my future, I've just pretty much straddled them both, and I've really destroyed my potential for happiness and whatever those moments can really bring in terms of personal fulfillment, right?
But then my question is, if you really, from the beginning of this podcast episode, what happens if you really want something and you're not getting it for whatever reason? You find yourself maybe doubting that it'll come, find yourself maybe it feels like you're slipping backwards because you're not being able to be present in the moment because you're kind of trying to grasp onto the future. What about then? Okay,
so two things. One, this is so unlikely though, Rhea, just so you know, like, because when you're really in your fate, everything that is written will come, right? When there's the thing that you desire and it's not presenting.
Is it optimal time for all?
That would have been our second point.
Sorry.
It's about being the optimal time for all. And no, it doesn't matter in the end. But the first point, see if you can follow us for a moment. It might just be that within that fate line, that desire is not written. So you're going to have to find another fate line where it is.
And is that when you quantum leap?
Yeah.
So every desire that you have, you can realize in this lifetime?
Yeah, absolutely.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. Humans really do have the simplest desires. It's really when we're fully conscious beings and fully alive and divine and like purely self-expressing that somehow we're suddenly like, oh, but now I want more, but now I want more, now I want more. Not necessarily more things, but just I want to be able to exercise my power. I want to figure out what I can create. I want to figure out what I can do. And that, you know, I might need extra support for that. And therefore, you know, that's just where it all starts to build. But in its simplest form, like we just want to love and be loved.
Yeah, that's true.
It's just the more conscious we become, that expands. And now we just want to be happy. Thank you for listening. For more information, articles, and inspiration, find us at karmasmybitch.com and at karmasmybitch.insta.
And if you liked what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review.